Hello you lovely lot, my name is Max, welcome back to my YouTube channel and another Nottingham Forest match preview, where today we are discussing our upcoming home match against Wolverhampton Wanderers. If you're new around here, these videos go as following. We start by providing some context to our opposition season thus far. We then talk a little bit about their stats and some of their key players, followed by a tactical breakdown and then an overall scoreline prediction. So if you do enjoy this kind of stuff, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. With that being said, let's start talking about Wolves. So as we usually do, we'll be starting by providing some context to the season thus far for our opposition. And this season for Wolves, I would say, has been their most tough, their toughest since their return to the Premier League a few years back. They currently find themselves in 13th in the league table, which would suggest that they are probably one of the more safe mid-table teams, but they most definitely find themselves within that 8 or 9 team pack at the bottom of the Premier League at the time of recording, who are all separated by about 5 points. And this is really despite the fact that, like us, they spent quite a lot of money this season, around £150 million in total, on the likes of Matheus Nunes, João Gomez, Nathan Collins, really decent signings who add decent quality to their side. But for every good signing, there was a poor signing. For example, €30 million spent on Gonzalo Guedes, who on paper looked like a great signing, but they basically spent the entirety of the Morgan Gibbs White money on one player who spent about 6 months, scored 1 goal in 13 games and was shipped off to Portugal more or less straight away. So not the greatest investment of their resources this season. Of course, as well, they sacked their manager Bruno Lage back in October. He was replaced a few weeks later by the former Spain and Real Madrid coach Julian Lopetegui, who seems to have steadied the ship up in the West Midlands, going from around 0.7 points per game during the initial few games of the season before he was appointed to around 1.3 points per game since his appointment. Definitely a lot more of a solid unit, and they're definitely looking like more of a mid-table side than they were at the beginning of the season. And of course, we've played Wolves a couple of times already this season. We knocked them out of the Carabao Cup a few months ago on penalties in a really tight game at the City Ground, as well as losing 1-0 back at Molineux in October, and again, a really tight match. And I want to focus on that league game because it was a really tight one, if I haven't said so already. Expected goals put it at 1.2 to 1.2. Expected points suggested it was more or less even. And we only marginally outshot Wolves 10-9 over the course of the 90 minutes. And but for a bit of luck in either direction, a penalty off Toffolo for a handball, a penalty off Adama Traore for a handball, the game really could have gone either way. And I think that's going to be setting the trend for this game later this week. With that being said, though, I think we should now move into the stats section for this video, take a look at what has made Wolves struggle so much in the Premier League this season. I feel like, although it's pretty obvious, it's interesting to look under the hood at where they're really struggling. Suffice to say, Wolves' attack this season has been misfiring. Like us, they are the bottom scorers in the Premier League this season, from the 4th lowest expected goals over the course of the campaign, and are the 7th biggest underperformers on expected goals compared against the goals that they've scored over the course of this season. It's definitely in the final third where Wolves have their biggest issue. And this is despite the fact that they actually take a pretty average amount of shots per 90 minutes. They're more or less middle of the pack. It's their ability to, or lack thereof, to get high quality opportunities. They rank 5th bottom in the Premier League for shots on target, and they rank 3rd bottom for expected goals per shot, meaning that whilst they get a decent volume of shots, it's the quality of that volume that they're really struggling with. And I think a big part of it is they're not really littered with natural goal scorers in that team. Podence and Neves are the only players in that team to have scored more than 2 league goals, with 2 of Neves' goals coming from the penalty spot, and generally just lacking that focal point in this side. And you would have thought from a pool of Sasha Kalajdzic, Raul Jimenez, Mateus Cunha, Diego Costa, that you would be able to generate decent goal scoring numbers. You'd be able to score a decent amount of goals, but between them, they've played about 2,000 league minutes this season and registered 1 goal and 1 assist between them. They've really not done too well. They've not set the world on fire. And of course, fitness and form come into this. Cunha just arrived in January, so that's pretty fair. Obviously, Diego Costa's had fitness issues. Raul Jimenez has had fitness issues. Sasha Kalajdzic did his ACL in his first game. Obviously, there is issues in terms of form and fitness, but when you're getting 2 goal contributions from 2,000 minutes out of 4 pretty decent strikers, that's pretty worrying. But when we flip things over and take a look defensively at Wolves, things look a lot more better, or certainly better than their attacking numbers. They've conceded the 15th most goals in the Premier League this season and are actually outperforming their expected goals against thanks to yet another decent season from the Portuguese shot stopper José Sá. And whilst they've conceded the 15th most shots in the Premier League this season, what Wolves are good at is restricting their opponents to these low quality opportunities, their ability to stifle oppositions and prevent them from getting these clear-cut goal-scoring opportunities, being 11th in the league for shots on target against, conceding their shots on average from the 6th greatest distance to goal in the Premier League this season, and being 9th for expected goals per shot. As a unit, Wolves just really aren't that bad. They're very solid. I think as a centre-back partnership especially, Kilman and Collins look fantastic. I think they are of a level that could potentially go higher than Wolves, and I think under Lopetegui they will find themselves being a solid mid-table side, if not a upper mid-table side next season. And in my opinion, that'll be in the Premier League. I think they'll stay up. I think of the 9 or so teams in and around that part of the table, I think them, West Ham and Leicester are pretty much safe. I think there will be. They're certainly good enough to stay in the Premier League, and I think Wolves are a really good example of that. Overall though, I feel like Wolves are kind of in the same position that they were in when they came back to the Premier League about 5 seasons ago under Nuno. Defensively, they're pretty good. They're worse than they were back then, of course, but defensively, you couldn't really get past them. Their attack, though, has continued to stagnate. They don't score enough goals to really push them into that next stage, but you would hope under someone like Julian Lopetegui, who is a very experienced and functional coach, you would be able to get better output at the likes of Jimenez, Cunha, Diego Costa, and Kalidžić, of course, when he comes back from that ACL injury. With that being said, though, I do want to change things up and talk about Lopetegui. So that being said, let's start talking a bit about the tactics. So I'm going to paraphrase this section by saying I haven't really seen a lot of Wolves this season. They're probably the Premier League side who I've seen the fewest games of this season, but I'm going to do my best to try and discuss them on a personnel basis and what you can get from the numbers and from what limited games I have actually seen from them. Now on the tactics board, we've got Wolves up in the yellow, we've got Forest up in the red, and historically we've associated Wolves, certainly since their return to the Premier League, with a back 3, back 5 system, that 5-3-2, 5-4-1, whatever you want to call it, under Nuno Espirito Santo, that seemed to somewhat continue under Bruno Lage. But this season, since the appointment at least of Lopetegui, there has been a desire to transition to a 4 at the back system, whether that be a variation on a 4-4-2, 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1. The idea being that there is a lot more freedom in the team. They're looking to play a better football at least, or at least more functional football, and get more out of the attacking players that they have by adding bulk to the midfield and the forward line. And obviously, if you're going through the personnel in this team, you've got the likes of Ruben Neves sitting in that sort of number 6 position. He's been coveted by the likes of Liverpool and Manchester United in recent years, and it's a matter of time really as to when he moves to a top 6 team. He is a very good defensive midfielder. I don't think he's one of the best in the league, but I think he is most certainly a European team quality defensive midfielder who can add a great deal of passing. He's got a great passing range on him, obviously a great set piece threat as well from free kicks and from penalties, and obviously has had a really good season for Wolves yet again. You've got João Moutinho, of course, in the midfield as well, pulling the strings. He is the player who has, I believe, completed the most progressive passes. He creates the most chances per 90 minutes, and he's in the top 2, 3, 4 players for like passes into the penalty area, passes into the final third. Still at his age, so essential for getting the ball upfield for Wolves. We've mentioned the defence as well. Of course, you've got Kilman and Collins. Collins arriving from Burnley last season, where, despite relegation, was probably one of the standout players in that Burnley team. And Kilman's doing a really good job at continuous progression as a Premier League centre-back. And as a centre-back duo, they've played the most minutes for Wolves this season, and I think look like probably the continuing centre-back pairing into next season under Lopetegui. The player I really want to spend some time focusing on, though, is the central midfielder Matheus Nunes. He is someone who has been quite heavily linked to Liverpool. He was heavily linked to them last season, eventually went to Wolves for around 40 million euros, which is actually a pretty decent fee. I think they'll make most of that back, if not decent profit on it, I think, Wolves. And Nunes is one of those central midfielders who I think most possession-based teams could really do with. He's a guy who can come deep to the centre-backs, receive the ball off the centre-backs, wriggle away from pressure from the opposition's press, break the lines, break through the press, and move through the thirds quickly. He is ridiculously good at ball carrying. If you look at things like progressive carries, dribbles completed, take-ons completed, his success rate in those metrics as well, his ability to make ground up through really good close control, but also quite freakish speed for a central midfielder. His ability to go quickly through the gears and up through the pitch in what is quite a sluggish team. Wolves is not exactly the quickest attacking team. They're very reliant on counter-attacking. He's the guy who can break through the thirds quite quickly, and when I look at him at least, and the numbers, and when I look at him in matches, he's definitely the player who's caught my attention the most. He is by far and away the most talented player in that Wolves team, and is a very exciting prospect. His ability to break through the lines, break the press through excellent ball carrying is Moussa Dembele-esque, I guess, at Tottenham, if that's a player you're looking to compare him to. And unfortunately for us, he will be playing against us despite the fact he got a red card against Leeds. I believe that has been overturned, so unfortunately we will have him to deal with in the match against him at the City Ground. Now, I think where most people would agree the biggest issues for Wolves is in the forward department in the final third. You've obviously got some very talented and flexible forwards who can play a multitude of positions. You've got Cunha, who can play left, right, striker, he can drop into the 10 slot as well. Podence can play either side, Neto can play either side. Generally, they're quite flexible, but I think they just lack that real creative spark in the team. Ironically, I think the player that Morgan Gibbs-White would have been had he stayed at them this season. The guy pulling the strings, making those dangerous killer passes, who can break the lines in a compact defence. They don't have that kind of player, and I think if you can sit back against them and defend in these deep positions, which I think Forest are pretty capable of, or should be capable of at least under Steve Cooper, if you can really compact this area of the pitch, I think you can really cause Wolves a lot of problems, because they just don't have that insightful passer, and it ends up seeing the ball go into these wide areas where likes of Traore and Neto are sort of expected to beat their man one-on-one. Now, in terms of the shape for Forest, I wouldn't be surprised if we just continued on with the same shape that we've been using, this sort of 4-3-3, false 9, 4-2-3-1 kind of shape that we've been experimenting with and tinkering with over the last few months. Dennis is in decent form, maybe he'll get some minutes. Awoniyi seems back in full training, maybe he'll get some minutes. Injuries to the likes of Scarpa and Brennan leave us a little bit thin on the ground in that position, particularly up front, but I think it should see us across the line with maybe a front line of Dennis, Awoniyi and Surridge, or Dennis, Awoniyi and Gibbs-White, for example. I think we can put together a competent front line despite the injuries that we've suffered in those positions. Another option that I've seen sort of floated around on Twitter is returning to the 3 at the back shape that we used under Cooper in our promotion campaign. Again, I wouldn't be surprised to see Cooper sort of shake things up again after a pretty poor run of form in recent games. The issue with that is, of course, that it can leave us a little bit outnumbered in that midfield. It might require us to play maybe a bit more of a defensive player in that number 10 slot and see Gibbs-White maybe push up into the front line, so that player can then drop back into the midfield, so we've got that consistent sort of shape in midfield. We've got a little bit more bodies in that area as well, particularly considering that this Wolves midfield is really nothing to be sniffed at. Núñez, like I've mentioned before, is fantastic. Moutinho's still pulling the strings. Neves is still a very solid presence in there as usual. So whilst going to the back 3 might offer a bit more defensive security in sort of deeper positions, having that sort of being outnumbered in the midfield could leave us potentially exposed, particularly, like I say, against what is quite a tough Wolves midfield, like so Núñez, Moutinho and Neves in those positions. So in terms of a scoreline for this match, again, I'm pretty hard pressed as to where to go for this. Our form has been pretty torrid in recent weeks. That late defeat to Newcastle at City Ground was, whilst our first one at home in quite a while, kind of the culmination of some pretty poor performances in recent weeks, or certainly a culmination of games that we really should be picking points up in. Although I do think the international break has been a blessing in disguise. The opportunity to get players back into fitness, the likes of Taiwo and Yates, hopefully looking to make more of an impact, being more fit to impact these matches. Obviously Mangala, Freuler and Gibbs-White seem to have had really good opportunities to get some form together on international break as well. So I'm hoping we can come back with a win. Of course, we're at home, which is, you know, an indefinite advantage over most teams anyway, and Wolves' away form is pretty poor this season anyway. So I'm going to go for a win. I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for Forest. It's going to be tight. I think, much like the previous 2 games, it's going to be very fine margins, but I hopefully, we can pick up a win in this one. Of course, though, let me know your thoughts on the game. Hopefully this one has come together quite well in post. It's definitely found itself quite a difficult one because I've ummed and ahed on quite a lot of the decisions in terms of where I think this game is going to go and the key things for Wolves and for Forest. But yeah, like I say, let me know in the comment section down below and your score line predictions. Watch down there, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the game if you're going Reds. I will catch you later.